Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another little programming lecture here. Today we're going to discuss variables. Now, a variable is essentially just a little storage location for you to put information. That can be information that somebody types in and tells you in a prompt or in a text box or something, or it can be, something you do in the program, whether it's math or something you need to save, some answer to something that you want to use somewhere else. A good example of this would be maybe I ask somebody for their name. I want to store that and use it somewhere else in the program. Or I ask them how much they plan to give me, like money wise, for something I'm selling. Well, I take that value, I have to put it somewhere. As of right now, we can print things, but we can't actually do anything beyond that. Variables allow us to do a little bit more. Once I get that value, I can store it in a little box called a variable. I set it up, I plug my value in it, and then I can do whatever math I need to do to figure out, let's say, how much change they get back. Once I do that calculation, I have to put it in another box, another variable. And then I can print it, display it, put it somewhere else and maybe do something else if I need to do something with it. That's essentially what a variable is. Now, there are several kinds of variables that we can make, and I'm going to go over basically how those work. Now, I did have a little bit of an issue earlier. This is actually like the third or fourth time I've started this project. Uh, because apparently my Visual Studios decided that every program I wrote was suddenly a virus. So hopefully I've gotten over that little bug. We'll find out. So I'm going to make a new project. It's going to be an empty console project here. Next. And I, again, always start with the date. So I'm just going to, underscore whatever the date happens to be. Uh, you know, introduction of variables or something along the lines of that. Make sure you save it where you want to save it. You can kind of leave everything else the same. And I should hit create. And voila, I have created. Now, I notice my virus scanner did not pop anything up, so that's good. I'm going to run this just in case, just to see. All right, it seems to have done stuff, so that's good. All right, let's move on. All right, so I can do a couple of things here. We can leave this kind of as the same if we want. If you want to, you can use the using namespace, so we don't have to have that std there. That's entirely up to you, though. You do have to spell it correctly, though. I think it was lowercase, but so. And then in theory, I shouldn't have to have that. And if I run this, let's see what happens. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these extra little comments at the bottom that I don't need. All right, so far so good. Everything's functioning the way it should. I'm going to put a little comment here at the end. And I don't really need that, actually, so I'll just comment it out for now. Now, I put a little, I guess you could say, label at the end of each of my braces. For now, we're only going to have really the one. But as we go throughout the class, you'll have more and more of these braces, and that's a very common place for someone to have a mistake, have an error. Sometimes you'll have, a couple of extra braces, and you may not necessarily know where the error is. But if you mark these, I find, I have spent literally an hour or two trying to figure out what's wrong with the program before when I was programming back in school, and it turned out to be a little brace, an extra one or one I was missing. So I teach people to do this because I don't want you to spend hours trying to hunt for something. You do this, it's better organized. You should be able to see, if this is the one that's supposed to end the one it says. And if I click over it, you see it actually tells me that's the end of the main there. and that should match. Int main, end main. There we go. If it doesn't match, then I have a brace issue, and I have to fix that. All right, so let's talk about different variables. One of our first variables are integers. Now, an integer is a whole number, something like 2.7 billion to negative 2.7 billion. And it starts off like this. Int number, we'll just say number 1 equals 5. Now, there is an integer. Now, before you do anything with a variable, you have to define what kind of variable that is. Integer is what kind this is. It holds whole numbers. Number 1 is the name I'm going to call it. And 5 is what I'm going to put in there. So this little equals is what's called an assignment. It means whatever's on the other side of this equals, I'm putting it into this variable here. And of course, we have to have a semicolon at the end of pretty much every line. So if I get rid of the int, it's going to give me an error because it's going to say number 1's is undefined. It doesn't know what it is. I have to define what it is before I can use it. Now, once I do that, I can simply just print, and it's called number 1. If I misspell it, obviously, it doesn't know what it is. But if I run this, I should be able to see an error, of course, because my ABG just popped up. Oh, goody. Let me hit OK here. And maybe you'll run into this issue. Hopefully not, because it's plaguing me for a moment. Let me try and get this thing to pop up. What are you doing? All right, well, there is the issue as soon as I start doing this, it seems. Well, we're still going to focus through this. For you, hopefully it's going to run. For me, it is apparently I'm going to have to do something with my ABG. I don't want it to delete that exe file. So just a heads up, what it is doing in my particular thing here is it is actually removing the program that I'm running. So if I try to do this again, it's going to tell me there are errors and it won't run. I'll get this. It can't find the exe file for this. So it seems to be, I've searched it up, it seems to be an issue. I have to go in there and tell it to not remove my programs. They're not viruses. So, but for now, I'll go through what your variables are going to be. Like I said, this is the third time I've done this, and I seem to be having some issues, and I'll fix it hopefully before our next program I make. So, first and foremost, we have int. That's a whole number, and I can print it. I can do some math with it. I can say int total equals, number 1 times 10 or something. And what that's going to do is it will take whatever is up here, 5, and it's going to multiply it by 10, which means this is going to end up being 50. 50, basically, equals 5 times 10. So if I were to print that, I would end up getting that nice little multiplication problem plugged into here. Now, the next one here is, let me zoom out a little. Doop. There we go. The next one is going to be, let's go with float, I guess. Now, a float, I'll just call it number 2. We don't generally use as much, and I'll explain why, but 3.14. Essentially what a float is, make a little comment here, it's a decimal number that goes up to basically 7 decimals. The other one version of this would be a double. And you'll see they look pretty similar here. And the difference here is this is a double right here, is a decimal number that goes up to 15 decimal places. And there are some others, but these are the primary ones we'll be using for this class. Now, anytime you're doing anything that requires like decimals, like money or anything like that, it really doesn't matter which one you use. Uh, Typically, it's just safer to use a double. Now, the thing about a double is it's bigger, like size-wise. So if we were making millions of these over and over again, and we didn't need all those extra decimal places, then a float would be vastly more efficient. The only time you usually see floats occur, at least in C++, C, things like that, well, maybe not C, but C++ and Java, would be if you were absolutely trying to be very picky about how much space you were using. You knew you're not going to use more than, like, let's say 5 or 6 decimal places, so it's fine. That would save you a ton of space. Most of the time, you don't really need to worry about that. If you're just doing a couple of variables here and there, it won't really impact. It won't make really any noticeable impact on anything you're doing. So I tend to just stick with the doubles. It's just easier to use for that matter. All right, so we've got an integer, a float, and a double. Those are essentially our 3 number items that we use to store things in. So we've also got a character. Now this can be pronounced char. I prefer care, just personal preference. But I do hear it pronounced char a lot because char looks like char. But for me, it's short for character. I always think care. But however you want to pronounce this, up to you. I'm not going to argue. But basically, it's a letter. And I can put, for example, the letter B. And it can be stored in there. I could put the letter P. Now, lowercase p, uppercase p are 2 separate things. So just so you know, uppercase, lowercase are not the same. What if I were to put an 8? Well, that's still a character. A character is one letter, or one character on your keyboard, I guess you can say. Even the dash, and the equal sign, and the space, that is a single character. Now, if I go beyond a single character, if I try to put in like multiple letters, it's not a character anymore. It's a string. So a character is a single letter, a single space. And I'll just put in, M or something. A letter. Or single item from the keyboard, I guess you could say. If you want to know what each and every letter is, you can check the ASCII table. You can just Google it, and you'll see an ASCII table. There are a lot of little intricacies involved in things you can do, but for now you don't really need to know too much about all the little things you can do with the ASCII table and letters and stuff like that. Now, the bigger version of this would be a string. Now, a string is a word. And this is usually denoted by quotes and not the single apostrophe that you see up here around the letter. And this would be fuzzy pickles. And a semicolon at the end. And there you go. Now I can put a word in here. I could put more words in here if I want. Now I should point out a couple of things now that we got a couple of these things written out here. Thing 1, I have an integer and an integer here, and that's fine. Now if I were to make, in this case, that's now a float and an integer. So depending on the language, they will either do that math and then cut off all the decimal places, or they'll just straight up give you an error. Let's see. I know it's not going to let me run it as I thought. Well, I'll try to run it here in a minute in another project and see what happens. We'll see. I think it seems to be me doing math that seems to anger it for some reason. But like I said, if my ABG still complains, I'll get it fixed. I'll make sure my next videos won't have any ABG issues with them. All right, so if I try to do this, I will either get an error or it'll cut off points. I would show you, but I'll try to show you here in a minute at the end once we get everything in. We'll see what happens. Now, words, I can add two words together. If I said, string word 2, and you can't have a space in these names. It's got to be all one thing. You can't have an underscore. You can't, however, have a dash as a name. That's not allowed. But underscore is allowed. Now, if I just said string word 2, there's nothing there. It's actually empty. So I need to put something in there. I'm going to call it just 2. If I were to say, back up here, okay. And if I were just to say, I don't know, words, I need to actually string words equals word plus word 2. Now what this is going to end up doing, now up here I would do math, and it would actually like add the things together and give me the result. This would simply just give you this. I'll make a little comment here. Fuzzy pickles. Okay. It's going to do what's called, it's just going to kind of combine the two together. It's called concatenation. So essentially, this plus this smacks them together. Now I could put like a little quote in the middle, like quote, quote, and then put a little plus. And I would actually end up getting something a little bit like this. It'll add that space in the middle. So words will end up getting this at the end. So just a little bit of how some strings and stuff work. Now there's a bunch of other stuff we can do on this. We'll see a little bit of that as we go throughout the class, but this is the basic way to define it and kind of utilize it a little bit. And of course I can print every one of these with a little cout, print this on the screen. Now we've got integers, which are whole numbers, floats, which are decimal numbers, like 3.1458, double the length of that as far as decimals go. Character is a single letter. String is a word, or words. And I think that actually goes up to 2.7 billion characters in size. The last one would be Boolean. Now, a Boolean, or bool, is simply just check equals true or false. Now, it's either going to be true or it's going to be false. That's the two things this will be. So a Boolean is a true-false variable. That's all it holds. And this is usually used to check if certain things have happened. Think of a game where, if you have a key, or if you've pressed a certain button or something, you go to the door, and if that is true, they would set what they call a flag, or in this case, this Boolean to true. If that's true, the door opens. So the door opens up. Or maybe if you're talking with somebody in a program or game or whatever, and you set a certain thing. Well, maybe you get a certain ending. So that Boolean would be checked to true, maybe several others, and if you get all of these true, you get a very specific ending. There are some games renowned for not working correctly. There was, I think, Fallout 2 was renowned for just being broken. You can actually go in and try to get these perfect endings, and it will never happen because the programmers messed up when they set these flags. So when you did the event that's supposed to change it to true, they forgot to, or something happened, and it just changed to false. So no matter how great you were, how well you executed whatever mission it is you needed to do, you actually could not get the ending that basically you should have gotten. I think some actual freelance people actually fixed that with some patches, but the original company didn't. It was just kind of left there broken. But there you go. This is a rough idea of how basic variables work. And of course, I can print this, and you would just see the word true or false pop up on my screen. So let me just copy and paste this here. I'm going to give myself a little check here. Copy. Now, I'm going to open one of my other projects. And this is how you would open a project. You go to File, Open Project. And this defaults to my basic repos file. I made a console application, I think, here that was functioning. Yeah, save that. It's fine. All right. Fuzzy Pickles, hello. Just a little test. Let's see. Yep, that worked. Okay. I'm just going to paste all that stuff in here. Oop. And ta-da. Let's see if it gives me an error. I'm willing to bet it's one of these things that seems to be malfunctioning me. So let me comment out that print statement actually. I'll leave that in for now. I'm going to run it as is. And nothing's going to print on the screen because I'm not printing anything. All right, good. And I'm going to leave this print here. And let's see what happens. Oh, there we go. 5 displayed. Okay. I'm working, at least for the moment, in this project. I don't know why my others were failing. But I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of little prints here just to show you that these print on the screen properly. So in this case, it would be number 2. And this would be number 3. And I probably want to do the total there as well so we could see that. So I'm just going to go in here and just put in some prints here. And hope my virus scanner doesn't decide to do whatever it is it does. So this time, letter. And I'm going to go ahead and forget about everything except for that last one here. So we're going to go for words. And I'll go ahead and print bool. I check here. All right. So if I did all this right, I should get some prints. Let's see. Run. All right. No crash, it seems. All right. And now I did a print statement. And your basic cout puts it all on the same line. So since I didn't put any extra spaces or anything after that, you'll see I've got 5, 50, 3.14, 3.14, M is that letter, and then I said fuzzy pickles. Now note this, 1. Now it didn't print off the actual like true false word, it printed off 1. But if I change this to false, take a look at what happens. We'll change it to false. I'll run it one more time. 0. Now, false is 0, 1 is true. Boom. So just so you know, like number-wise, in a lot of languages, they do this. They'll treat false as actually like a 0 and true is a 1. That's how they determine if it's happening or not with those little integer variables. As far as we're going, as far as we're doing in our project, we just need really just to say, does this equal false or does this equal true? It would be the same as does it equal 1 or does it equal 0. But it's only 2 choices for that Boolean there. Now I think we were going to check up here 0.9. If I tried to multiply by that, what will we get? All right, let's take a little look. Now, instead of 50, what we got was 54. Yeah, so it did multiply by that little decimal place, but it didn't give me anything after that. Since I made this an integer, it just cut off any excess decimals at the end. If I made this a float, however, just to show you what that looks like, you'll see it's 54.5 now. So it actually has a little bit of extra there, depending on what you make it. So if this is an int, it's going to cut off the pieces. If it's not, it's not. And there may be a couple of times where, depending on how you write it, it may just say, I don't like that, and you have to do something else. But for the most part, it just cuts it off and makes it a integer in this case. So there's a quick little rundown of how variables work, and one potential problem you could have if you have AVG apparently. But there you go. As we go forward, we'll be using these values and variables to store, do math, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So that's the lesson. Any questions, feel free to ask me. I'll be happy to explain.